Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Ryan. I play chess and put my videos on YouTube. Here I wanted to continue my Beginner Chess Master channel and just talked today a little bit about the relative piece value of each piece, the pawn, rook, knight, bishop, queen, and king. I wanted to start off and explain what the relative value means. It's basically just a system that assigns a point value to each piece when assessing its relative strength in evaluating potential exchanges that you might want to do. A pawn is always going to be worth 1 point. A knight and bishop are worth 3 points respectively. A rook is worth 5, a queen is worth 9, and the king is basically worth an infinite amount of points simply because if it's captured, the game is over. So calculations of the value of pieces provide only a rough idea of the state of play. The exact piece values will depend entirely on the game situation and can differ considerably from those given here. In some positions, a well-placed piece might be worth a lot more than indicated by the actual piece value, while a badly placed piece may be completely trapped and thus almost worthless in the game. So let's start it off and talk about what pawns are worth. So there are connected pawns and disconnected pawns, non-connected pawns. You can see here that black is going to have a stronger position simply because his 3 pawns here are connected. Even though that material is completely equal in this position, black will have a easier position to deal with simply because they're connected. And vice versa, black is going to have a hard time, moving many of his pieces because of these connected passed pawns. So it's just an immediate disadvantage for you to have non-connected passed pawns in the opening. In the endgame now, it's a completely different story if we were to look at this, relatively similar position, but you can see here in an endgame, this was also an endgame here, but it was just to exemplify my main point of non-connected pawns are oftentimes, especially in the opening, less valuable and weaker than connected pawns. But in the endgame, such as this is going to be very strong for white because of the chance and the opportunity to queen one of these pawns. For example, if it was white to move, we might move here, and then you might want to chase down this pawn, then we could move here, you might come back here, and we could, they're too far apart for the king to handle this kind of, pressure. We're eventually going to queen one of these pawns. So in the endgame, non-connected pawns, especially on the H and A files, these side files are very nice to have. It's called a passed pawn. I have here the relative value of pawns in the opening versus in the endgame, and this kind of exemplifies that point more. On the A and H file, a non-passed pawn in the opening is worth 0.9 on the 2, 3, 4, and 5 rank here, but in the endgame, like I just showed, they are worth considerably more as we move up the rank, and since they're on the sidemost files. You can see that the D and E files are strong in the opening again here, and weak in the endgame. So that just proves my point of how the relative piece value changes so much throughout the game and depends on certain situations. Next, I wanted to talk about knights and their piece value. They are worth 3 points in a game. Knights are really nice because they can jump over other pieces. It's the only piece that can do that. And knights in the central squares here are worth more than on the rim. There's a common saying, knights on the rim are dim, and that's just because they only have 4 spaces to jump to, compared to in the center, where it has 8 spots to jump to potentially. You want to always maximize the activity of your pieces, and a knight in the center is a lot stronger than on the side. Compare, this position right here, where it's controlling all of the center, to right here, where it really only has 2 spots to jump to. A bishop is worth 3 points as well as a knight. Bishops are nice because they control diagonals. Bishops in the center of the board, just like the knights, are going to be stronger simply because they, cover more space than, for example, if he was right here, he would only control this file. That's why you always want to try to centralize your pieces. I'm going to be talking about controlling the center in one of my later videos, but bishops are worth 3 points usually, and we're going to talk about some situations where bishops and knights and other minor pieces are worth more than they are just alone here. But let's get to rooks. Now I think it's interesting because I played against a couple of my friends and they think that rooks are somewhat less valuable than knights and bishops, but that's absolutely not the case, as the point value would point out that rooks are worth 5 points to a bishop and knight's 3 points. The reason being is that rooks are just like bishops, except for they control the vertical and horizontal files. Rooks are very strong in the endgame, especially when they are connected with another rook or a queen. Last but not least, the queen is the most powerful piece in the game. That's why it's worth 9 points. It can move diagonally, it can move horizontally, it can move vertically. It covers the most amount of squares as any other piece in the game. That's why it's the most important piece to try to hang on to and to centralize. Just like our bishop, you don't want it really in the corner simply because it's not maximizing its full potential as it would, you know, in some of these central spots here. So a queen is very nice to have simply because it can cover so much space. And last but not least, the king is worth you know, an infinite amount of points simply because if it's captured, the game is over. So a situation where the queen is worth less than 2 pieces that are not a queen is in the endgame when there are 2 rooks versus a queen. Typically, you're going to see more activity because these are worth a combined 10 points to a queen's 9 points. So it's basically like having a queen and a pawn to an opponent's queen. You're going to be slightly favorable in this. In the middle game, having 2 rooks versus a queen, the game is relatively equal simply because the point in the game that, you know, the situation is at. A rook versus 2 minor pieces is also you know, subject to being less valuable simply because these 2 pieces combined are worth 6 points and this is only worth 5 points. There's a lot more, you know, ideas that can be involved in having 2 pieces versus 1. It's going to be more challenging to play than you know, if it was just a rook versus a rook. And in the opening, you'll typically find that knights and bishops are worth more than rooks, simply because rooks are, you know, closed in right here. They haven't been activated since you haven't castled yet. So right away in the opening, this is an example of when, you know, rooks are not as valuable as bishops potentially. Pieces are really only as valuable as the spaces that they can, you know, attack and cover. And since this is only controlling 1, 2, you know, 3 pieces right now compared to, or squares right now compared to a bishop's, you know, whole diagonal and a knight's, you know, space, a rook in the very opening of the game is going to be less valuable. But as you'll see, you know, rooks become more valuable as they begin to control central files here in the opening. A rook lift, I've explained in some of my other games, are some of the most important attacking methods that you have. So rooks are usually, bishops are often more powerful than rooks in the opening. Rooks are usually more powerful than bishops in the middle game, and rooks dominate minor pieces in the end game. That's kind of the flow of how piece value goes throughout a game. So we're going to talk about a situation in which the relative value of pieces is somewhat interesting and try to kind of summarize some main themes that I talked about in my video today. We see here that our knights are completely dominating in this situation. They're both connected with each other, which is usually an advantage. They're occupying holes in the position that are protected by a pawn, so it's a piece protected by a pawn. So this is a really, you know, strong knight here in the center. We can also notice that our queen is a little bit more active than black's queen. Because our rook is in the corner here, we can see that we're at an automatic disadvantage because this rook is not going to be in the game at all. So we're at a major disadvantage here with our rook being shut out when compared to these 2 rooks, however. This bishop is also, you know, doing a nice job pinning down this pawn, so this is a very favorable bishop. The main advantage in this position is for white. He's got beautiful knights here in the center and a active queen. Some disadvantages are this rook in the corner here, and black here has nice central control minus this knight being here. And this knight over here for black in the corner on a6 is quite a bad knight. Remember that knights on the rim are dim. He's not able to, you know, reach his full potential. Let's see, what else about this position? In this position, I would almost say that this knight is worth as much as a rook. I don't know if I would think a long time before trading this knight for this rook because this knight is so well placed on this file. On this d6 square, it's nice and central. It's controlling a lot of very key squares in black's territory, so I wouldn't trade this rook, even though it is worth 5 points right away. You can see that this bishop is worth a little bit more than white's bishop, simply because this pawn right here, this bishop is blocked in by this pawn, whereas this bishop is, you know, pinning this pawn. It's got an open file. It's protected by this pawn, so that's an advantage that black has in this situation. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you learned a little bit more about the relative value of pieces, and I wish you the best of luck in your chess games. What's up, guys? Thanks again for watching my video here today. I really appreciate it, and if you have any questions about any specific moves or anything about the game, please leave them below. I'd love to answer those. And last but not least, if you got anything out of this video at all, or you just simply enjoyed it, I would highly encourage you to subscribe. It helps me out a lot, and that way you can, you know, get in touch with any future videos that I put out. Anyways, have a good rest of your day, and good luck in your chess.